been spectacular. I love Toronto. And you know, I live up on a mountain in Western Maryland, so actually the weather is pretty much the same there as it is here. So it's a major change. I was really excited to hear you guys do a shout out to hymns this morning in the awards. I did this painting that you see before you for John Sharp, who works at HIMSS, and he works on patient inclusion and the Patient Advisory Council. And this jacket was about his original work years ago in talk groups, like talking people through their problems, support groups, and how, as we get into digital technology, you'll see that insular closed circle is growing and changing, and it's spreading throughout the world. And it was great to hear that you're going to be more part of that conversation in the future. So it's amazing what you can do as far as communicating with digital technology, and it's amazing what you can do communicating through art in conjunction with digital technology. You probably have noticed nothing spreads like a picture. It's amazing how we share that. And I've been blessed by my entire life being able to, oh, a clicker? Sorry. Being able to talk to people, but also being able to paint about the things that mean something to them. See, when I was a really small child, I really struggled in school, okay? I couldn't read, I couldn't understand, I couldn't sit still. And when I was in church with my mom, she would tell me, Regina, you have to sit still. And she said, here's the program, you just draw on the back of the program. And so when I was a very young child, I started drawing sermons. I started drawing the content of the person on stage. And I did that for years and years. And when my son was born, my eldest Freddie, he can't sit still either. So I told him, Freddie, all you have to do is draw the sermon, and you can sit still. And he started to draw. And one day when my son was drawing, I looked down at his picture, and it was a very odd picture. There was a giant half circle, and then there were houses down at the very bottom, and then there were people in the middle. And I said, Freddie, what are you drawing? And he said, Mommy, I'm drawing Noah's Ark from below. Now, I got to tell you, I've seen a lot of pictures of Noah's Ark in my life, and there's usually this beautiful blue sky, a rainbow, a bird, there's triumphant people and animals. It is a beautiful picture, and that is the first time I ever saw a drawing of what lies beneath. And in healthcare, we often need to consider that pure child's vision. There are two sides to every story. There are two points of view, and that's really important to address them both. When I was in first grade, I really struggled. I couldn't read. I actually failed first grade and went to a second year of first grade, and that was really hard. I lost all my friends. And every day on elementary school recess, there was this brick wall beside my school playground, and what I would do is I would draw on it. I would take shale and chalk and just draw on that. And that was a way to deal with my stress and my inability to communicate very well with my teachers. And I thought maybe if I could draw about the things, it wouldn't matter so much that I couldn't read about them. Now, as the years passed, I was struggling in school, but I was doing really well at one thing, which was watching television. Okay? And what I didn't know is that's me at 6, and that's my future husband Fred at 6, and we were across the nation from each other because I grew up in Oklahoma and he grew up in Maryland, but we had this in common, we had television in common. And when I look back, I think about what taught me how to be an empowered patient, and it was television. See, I watched the Waltons. I loved that show. I loved Grandma Waltons. And one day I just started realizing she was missing. I was a little girl, and I didn't understand why Grandma Walton was gone. But then one day she came back, and it turned out the actress who had played Grandma Walton, well, she had had a stroke. And there was no reason they had to have her come back. There was no ADA legislation that had passed that said that she should come back on that show. They just decided to let her be part of the continuing story. And she came back, and she had trouble speaking, and she had trouble with her facial expression. But it was powerful to watch her there. And it was personally powerful to me because later that same year, my mother had Bell's palsy. So I watched her face fall. And because of Grandma Walton, I knew she was going to get better. Then up over on this right-hand side, that's Quincy M.E. I loved that show. I was like a 9-year-old watching forensic science, you know? And what I didn't know at the time is that actor, Jack Klugman, he actually testified before Congress to get a very important piece of legislation passed called the Orphan Drug Act. And he did that as an actor who played a doctor on television. up in the middle, that's Hawkeye Pierce. Both my husband and I love the show MASH. Now, I don't know if you know this, but MASH was the #1 watched program in the United States up until the 2010 Super Bowl, the last episode, 1983. That's how many people watched it. And I was one of those people who watched that last final episode. And what was really powerful and amazing about it is they were talking about something you were talking about, mental health. Because we got to watch one of our favorite actors doing a wonderful portrayal of a doctor who's having a complete nervous breakdown because he saw on a bus a woman with a chicken, and then he asked her to make the chicken shut up, and she did. And as the episode progressed, you realize she wasn't holding a chicken, she was holding a baby, and she had smothered it to make it be quiet so the enemy did not find them. And as a doctor, he had to deal with that. And we, as a nation, we got to watch that and be part of that journey. Then there's the Incredible Hulk. You probably remember that guy, right? I love that. I say go back and watch the first episode. It's powerful and astounding because within that episode, you get a man, watch him love his wife so, so very much and start to lose her and realize there is absolutely nothing he can do to stop it. And watch him dedicate the rest of his life to trying to change that for other people. Then finally, personally, Mary Ingalls was important to me because of something that happened to me in 4th grade, which was I convinced my mother I needed to go to an eye doctor, okay? Because Mary Ingalls had this episode where she's pulling on her eyes and trying to see the chalkboard. I said, Mom, I'm doing everything that Mary Ingalls was doing. So I got to see one of these for the first time. Now, I will tell you, when I went to the regular doctor as a child, I was an uninsured patient, which meant that we didn't go very often. So if we were just sort of sick, that's what Vicks Vapor Rub was for, okay? And if we were more than sort of sick, my mom had this jar of stuff called Green Drops, and Green Drops fixed everything. Now, she'd gotten her bottle in the 1930s, so I'm not sure how good it was by 1970, but that was the solution. But if we ever went to the doctor, that means we were dreadfully sick, like carry you to the doctor sick. And when I'd go, I would just sort of lay there on the table, and he'd look in my eyes, and he'd look in my nose, and he'd look in my mouth, and then he'd walk away from me. He'd walk over to my mom, and he would say, Mrs. McCandless, your daughter has another tonsil infection. She needs to get this prescription filled. Here, give this to her. Make sure she takes it. If she does not get better, you come back in 2 weeks. And then the doctor would walk out of the room, and he wouldn't talk to me. The eye doctor was completely different. In the eye doctor's room, what they do is they set you up on a throne, okay? And then this thing comes in front of your face, and these glass slides start coming down, and the doctor says, is this one better? Or this? A or B? And all along, I'm saying these answers, and he's clicking, and he's clicking, and he's clicking, and I'm saying things, and he's clicking, and he's doing exactly what I tell him to, and then at the end, I can see. And it was so amazing. And 1 week later, I had glasses. And I was so excited because when I walked outside, I could see there are leaves on trees again. And it was beautiful. Now, when I was in 4th grade, one of the challenges was I couldn't see, yes, but I had this amazing teacher named Mrs. Graham who really got the fact that I had a learning disability, and she worked with me on reading, and she was just 100% there for me. And when I got my report card, I was so excited because I had gotten good grades, and she asked me how to write out my name. And I had the last name McCandless back then, and I was dyslexic, so I had to reverse the capital letter C with a little c in the wrong order. And she said, are you sure? Most people do them the other way. And she said, no. I said, no, I like it, the big capital here and the little one there. And she wrote it that way because she loved me. And then I brought it home for my dad. See, I wasn't only a learning disabled student who was incredibly poor, I had an abusive and alcoholic father. So when he saw that my teacher couldn't even write my name correctly, he began to write horrible things to her on my report card that had my good grades. And I couldn't let her get in trouble because she'd really done nothing wrong. So I told him, it's not her fault, it's mine. I told her to spell it that way. And I'd been brushing my hair with this pretty pink hairbrush. It was a big, heavy hairbrush. And I had it sitting by the counter when I told my father. So he picked up the hairbrush and just smacked me on the side of the head with it for being so stupid that I didn't even know how to spell my name correctly. And so I had a welt on my face, and I had to go to school that way. And when I got to school, I couldn't go in the classroom. I just sat on the stairwell, and I cried. And my teacher came out to me and asked me what happened. And I told her everything. I told her everything he had done to me. And she gave me some Kleenex and she asked me to wash my face. And I came into class and nothing happened. Now at my school, we would have occasional visitors. We would have the fireman, and he taught us stop, drop, and roll. And we would have the dentist. He put the pink tablets in our teeth, and they turned our teeth pink, you know. But about 2 to 3 weeks after I talked to my teacher, we had a police officer come to my class. And what he did is he brought that card that day. And it was hotline numbers in Creek County, Oklahoma. And it was, if you see abuse in your life, he told the class. Some of you may see it. It may be in your homes or at your friends' houses. But if you see abuse, when the abuse becomes too bad, you call these numbers. Now this is where, if you ever see me in a meeting and I get really angry about semantics, this is the reason why. When the abuse becomes too bad. I waited 7 years before I called that number. We have to be very careful what we tell our patients, what we tell our children. They see the world from a different view and a different set of eyes. I was blessed to get through school, to get out of an abusive situation. I even managed to go to college. And when I had my first experience at college, I met this amazing man named Regina Holliday. We were in this scenic painting class together, and we would basically show up at 10 o'clock at night, and we would paint all night long. These huge, huge paintings. And we would talk about Garth Brooks and Metallica. He was a Catholic. I was a Lutheran. By 3 o'clock in the morning, we were throwing paintbrushes at each other. We would talk about Stephen King and all kinds of literature. And after an entire semester of this, we realized we were in love. And we decided to get married. And I dropped out of school and started supporting my husband while I got a master's degree and got a PhD. He wrote his dissertation on Buffy the Vampire Slayer. Our children were born, Freddie in 1998 and Isaac in 2006, and our life was rolling along. This is our family picture from 2007. At this point, between my husband and I, we worked 6 jobs. We still couldn't afford health insurance for the entire family, and we were really struggling to get by. By 2008, we basically said, we have some New Year's resolutions. We actually wrote these babies down, and unlike normal New Year's resolutions, we were determined to do them. So it was get medical insurance for the whole family, get Freddie into a special needs school because my eldest son had been diagnosed with autism. Fred needed a job in his field. We wanted to spend more time together as a family, and we were a family of 4 living in a 1-bedroom apartment in Washington, D.C. So we just wanted a little more space. And I gotta tell you, we were blessed, because this year, everything happened. Fred got hired by American University. That gave us the job in his field. We got insurance for the family through the job. We got to spend more time together as a family. Our eldest son got into a special needs school. It was like everything was coming together that year. And we were just so excited. We didn't have the apartment, but we thought everything else has happened. This is our year. This is my husband's business card. He was so proud of this. It was not made on our home computer, you know? And he gave it to everyone we met. And the only bad thing was he was really tired and fatigued because he was working really hard between 2 departments and trying to really impress his bosses. And so we went to the doctor to find out why he was so tired, and they diagnosed him with hypertension. Now I thought this was a bit odd because my husband actually had lost about 30 to 40 pounds. He was more fit than he'd been in years, it seemed, because he'd been losing weight, he'd been exercising. So he thought, why is he getting hypertension now? If you read my husband's status lines January and February and March of 2009, you would have noticed a pattern. He was in a lot of pain. He was hurting. In January, he broke his rib from coughing. He broke actually several ribs. And when he went to the ER, they said, well, sometimes people just cough to the point they break their ribs. But my doctor thought that was a bit unusual because he was only 38 years old at the time, and it wasn't an explosive cough. By March of 2009, he was having excruciating back pain. He wasn't even worried about the rib pain anymore. He was going to the doctor on a pretty weekly basis, and they were giving us pain medications. By March, we were actually on 4 types of pain medications, 2 narcotic, 2 types of muscle relaxants, and 4 types of laxatives, and we had no diagnosis as to what was wrong with him. On March 13th of 2009, we went to the ER because this was a Friday, and my husband was hurting so bad he was crying when he came home from work. I said, honey, let's just go to the ER because they're going to have to figure out what's wrong with you there. So I got the kids together with some toys, and we went to this ER. We went to the pretty one, the one with the stained glass windows and the beautiful blue couches. There was a coffee shop, and there was a gift shop, and it was lovely. And we waited for 3 hours in chairs for someone finally to come out and say, we are backed up. Your husband's not going to be able to see anyone today. You might as well go back to your regular doctor and schedule an MRI next week. When we went back to my husband's regular doctor, I demanded an MRI. I said, we have been seeing you for 6 months at this point, and you don't know what's wrong with him. So where can we get this test? And we found out way out in the country, in Oldham, Maryland, there was an open MRI that would see us that week. And my husband drove out there. He got his information on a CD. He drove the CD all the way back into town, and he gave it to his doctor. 4 days later, she called us. She said, I've looked at the MRI, and you need to make an appointment with an oncologist. Here's the phone number. Click. I got to tell you, I knew so little bit of medicine at that point that I didn't even know what an oncologist was. I had to look up that online, and it is a cancer doctor. So we went to the hospital for tests. My husband was admitted because they said he'd get the tests faster if they admitted him. And I did something you're not supposed to do. I left him in the hospital. I did not know you do not leave patients by themselves in the hospital. I had 2 little kids at home, and I was supposed to take care of them, and I was supposed to go to work at the toy store where I worked. And so I left him there, and I thought he would be okay. But on March 27th, I was at the toy store helping a customer with a toy when my husband calls on the phone. My boss came up and said, Reggie, it's Fred. And I picked up the phone, and he was crying. He said, the doctor's been in my room, and I have tumors and growths throughout my abdomen and a 3-centimeter tumor in my kidney, and I don't understand what's going on. Could you please get here as soon as possible? And I didn't drive. So my boss's wife drove me to the hospital. I ran in, and I hugged my husband. I said, okay, I will find out what's going on. I will find out. So I ran to the nurse's station. I said, there was a doctor who just talked to my husband. He said all kind of horrible things about tumors. Can I talk to that doctor? And the nurse said, he has left town for a medical conference, and he'll be gone for the next 4 days. I tried to call him. I tried to email him. I got no response to my calls and questions. I went all over that hospital asking people questions. There were computers all over the hallways, and I'd walk up to a person at the computer and say, please, can I see that? Because I need to know what's going on with my husband. What's the diagnosis? What's the treatment plan? What's the prognosis? What's going to happen next? And they told me, we can't show you that. When the doctor got back in town from his medical conference, he went to my husband at 7:30 rounds and said, so, Mr. Holliday, I understand your wife's been asking questions about this case. And my husband had worked in food service, and he knows what happens to people's burgers if you complain about them. So he was like, I don't want to be the complaining person in a hospital, Reggie, because you leave and I stay. And he said, yes, my wife has been asking questions. And the doctor said, well, if she has questions, she needs to come to my office hours and ask them. And I did. And this is a painting of that day. And I'm kneeling in the painting because I was kneeling emotionally. And I was trying to write down all the things he said. And he was speaking so fast and all these words I didn't understand. And there was the phone call ringing and the door kept opening with people interrupting us. One woman wanted to know what was wrong with that one employee who keeps parking in the wrong parking space. And this lovely lady wants to know about Miss Rosa's chemotherapy suite. Will it be available later today? And between all these interruptions, I'm trying to write down the information. I say, please, please, could you slow down? Because I don't understand all these words and I have to research them online. And he said, I don't like people who research online. I said, I'm sorry, but I don't have a background in medicine, so my only way to understand you is to research these terms. And he said, that's right. I'm the one with the medical degree. So if you look on the wall in the background, what looks like a diploma there, it says, I have the medical degree. And if you look in the shadows in the background there, it's our family. Because this might have been one moment in one day for this doctor, but it was the moment in our life that it broke apart. I found out there's a special place in hospitals called medical records, where they're supposed to give you your medical record. And I went down to medical records after being hospitalized with my husband for 3 weeks. And I said, I need the entire medical record to find out what's going on. And they said, that'll be 73 cents per page and a 21-day wait. I said, how can you do that? It's right there in the computer. All you got to do is push print. They said, that's just the way it is. Now, at the very same time all this was happening, my husband was a huge Stephen King fan. Okay? So I knew that fall Under the Dome was coming out, which was the book, if you were a Stephen King fan, because this was the book back in the 1970s Stephen King had in a car, and then a cab, and then he walked off and left it in there, and it got destroyed. The book was gone forever. Stephen King had to rewrite the entire book. That's this book, right? So my husband was so excited that it was coming out in the fall of 2009, but I was researching kidney cancer. And I knew there was a really good chance my husband was not going to make it to the fall of 2009. So I emailed the book buyer at the toy store where I worked, and she emailed the marketing director, who emailed Stephen King, who asked them, can we get a copy of your new book for this man who has cancer in Maryland? And Stephen King said yes. So in 7 days through email, we got access to a book by an A-list author 7 months before publication, when we couldn't get access to the medical record while hospitalized. On April 18, 2009, my husband was in bed, and it was a Saturday, and I was unwrapping presents on Saturdays for our children because they visit on Sunday. And the presents are hidden throughout the room because it's so scary in hospitals. And my eldest has autism, and my youngest is only 3, and we've got to try to make this as good as possible. And when I was wrapping presents, the doctor walked to the door of the room, and he was standing about as far away as you are right now. He didn't actually walk in, he just stood at the door. And we had a list of questions in case the doctor was to come in the room. And there were questions like, when are we going to get surgery? When are we going to get something called a palliative pain consult? When are we going to get a walker so my husband can try to walk again? And the doctor said, don't worry about the questions. We've decided we're sending you home on a PCA pump. Now, I don't know if you guys know that much about hospice, but that's a euphemism for being told we're sending you home to die. And that is the point my loving husband, who never complained, who gave all his edible arrangements to the nurse's station, that is the point he said, go after them, Regina. So I began to fight for 5 days for my husband to get transferred to another facility so we could get a second opinion on his care, so we could get access to the information and make a choice in what was supposed to happen to him for the rest of his life. My husband was transferred with an incomplete and out-of-date electronic medical record summary and information, which meant once we got to the new facility, they could provide no care other than a bed while they tried to recreate the medical record using a phone and a fax machine. It took over 6 hours with him not on pain meds to finally get enough of a medical record cobbled together for him to get back into some kind of pain regimen for care. The very next day, when my husband's doctors came to me, they said, we can't treat him to the level we need to treat him without access to that medical record. So we are sending you back to the original facility to get the entirety of the document, all films, all CDs, all information. And I said, I've been trying for 3 weeks to get that information. There is no way they're going to give it to me. And they said, they're going to give it to you this time because we're sending you as a courier. You're getting it for us. They printed out the medical record in 1.5 hours for the new doctors, and I gave it to them. They read it for about an hour, and then they gave it to me. I'm like, you said this was important. You said you needed this. And they said, yes, it's important, but there's nowhere in our system to put it. We just wanted to read through it. You should have it. There is no one who's going to be with that patient more than you. You are the continuity of his care. And I read it. Now, I've been a preschool art teacher. I've been an artist, a clerk in a toy store, and I read that medical record, and by the end of it, I was furious. Because not only was it full of medical error, I understand these things happen, but it was full of actionable data that had not been acted on. People weren't reading the record. The most glaring was upon admission on 3/27, it said patient in his MRI test has a distended bladder. In his CAT scan, patient has a distended bladder. Again, on 3/29, it said patient has a distended bladder in another test, PET scan. Nurse's progress notes of 4/7 stated, concerned, patient is retaining urine. Radiology was off-site at that facility. And on 4/10, the radiologist came to me after doing her test saying, Mrs. Holliday. And she literally grabbed my shoulders. I've tried to call your hospital. I've tried to call your doctor. They're not returning my calls. I need to let you know your patient has a dangerously distended bladder to the point of rupture. He needs to have catheter placed. You are responsible for making sure catheter gets placed when you get back to that hospital. We got back. I went right to the nurse's station. I said, we need to place a catheter. My husband's got a very distended bladder. The radiologist told me, but he has a pre-existing condition I need to let you know about. He has something called a urinary tract stricture. He's had catheter placed twice in his life. You're going to need a urologist. They said, well, we'll just try anyway. So they tried with a 16 gauge and were unsuccessful. They tried with a 12 gauge and were unsuccessful. Then they gave up and called for urologists the next day. The nurse's progress notes of that day state, patient refused treatment. So what am I going to do? I'm a nobody. I'm a clerk. I'm an artist. I emailed 1,000 of my friends and said, I want a wall. I want a wall, and I want to paint my husband's medical record full scale on that wall. I want to show end-stage cancer to the world and all the information that you should know, and I'm going to base it on the nutrition facts label to make it that clear and understandable for patients and their families so they can make the decisions they need to at this point in their life. And of my 1,000 friends, one couple came forward. They ran a delicatessen in Washington, D.C. They said, all we've got is a space next to our menu, but you can have that. I said, I'm going to paint end-stage cancer next to bagels and lox. Are you sure about that? And they said, yes, because our mom went through this too. And I did paint that at 3:30 in the morning, and all the world could see it the next day. At the same time, we were using Facebook as a kind of caring bridge. I did not believe in a closed community. I wanted an open one. I wanted the entire world to know what was going on with us, and more friends the better. And what's powerful and amazing about this is, guess what? All those people who listened back then, they're still my friends today. They're still part of this caring network of advocacy and sharing. I worked at the toy store only 3 days when my husband was sick, and one of those days, an old customer of mine came in, and I said, I feel I must tell you, my husband has cancer. He has kidney cancer. And she said, oh my goodness, I just got back from a medical conference, and I met this man. His name is E-Patient Dave. And you've got to meet him because he had kidney cancer and he's alive. I'm like, what? He had stage 4 and he's alive? And they said, yes. I said, I must meet the E-Patient Dave. How do I meet the E-Patient Dave? And she said, you get on Twitter. And I said, what is the Twitter? And she said, just go home tonight and get on the computer and Google it. You'll figure it out. So that night, with the help of my 10-year-old autistic son, I figured out how to tweet. That is my first tweet. I am trying to talk with Christine Kraft and E-Patient Dave. If you know anything about Twitter, you know that is so wrong. There's no @ symbol. It's just, I didn't know anything. But E-Patient Dave is so amazing. With that tweet, he found me. And he started to tweet to me and realized really quickly I was incompetent. And then he began to email to me and then call me on the phone and said, you need to talk to my doctor. And by 10 o'clock that night, I was talking to a doctor from Harvard, who is a foremost authority in the US for kidney cancer, through Twitter. And he was amazing, because what was most amazing is I started telling the entire process, what we've gone through, what's the status of my husband at the time, and he does not interrupt me. He just listens. He listened to everything I had to say, and then there was this pause. And then he did the most wonderful and brave thing. See, I'd asked other doctors that were friends or husbands of friends, and they said, you know, we really can't say anything without seeing the patient. But this doctor on the phone said, you know, sometimes we just catch these things too late. Sometimes we just have to enjoy the end of a life. So in hospice, I don't know if you heard of the hospice turnaround. It's a thing. My husband went from not being able to eat anymore and barely being able to sit and barely being able to talk in a curative care setting to being able to sit up and smile, watch TV, talk with his friends. He can eat chocolate pudding again. We got 3 weeks of wonderful life because of hospice. And then after the 3rd week, the nurse came in the room and said, so your husband's stable. We're going to have to see about sending him home. And I said, well, how are we going to go home? We live in a 1-bedroom apartment with 2 kids. One has autism and one is 3. It's not even handicap accessible, so how are we going to go home? And the nurse said, have you thought about moving? So we moved to a new apartment so my husband could come home. And for the next 6 days, I was his everything. I was his caregiver. I was his electronic medical record. And at the 6th day, my husband woke up and said, Reggie, my catheter blew. And I called the hospice nurse and she came and she was amazing. She placed a spectacular catheter. My husband was like, oh, you're so good at that. And she said, yeah, I worked at the VA for 20 years. And then she started to sweep our floor. I said, you don't have to sweep our floor. She said, you just be with your husband and give him atropine drops as needed. And then something happened called terminal restlessness. Now, I thought that was like a Tom Hanks film or something. But it's a real thing that can happen to some people, and sometimes it's bad. But in the case of my husband and I, we had our last all-nighter. We talked all night about Garth Brooks and Metallica, about our sons, about Stephen King. And at 6:30 in the morning, he turned to me and said, Reggie, you look so tired, you should go to sleep. And I did. I slept for 1 hour. Then I got up for 7:30 meds. And I got him to my husband. I said, here, you need to take this 7:30 meds, because he was really compliant. And he wouldn't wake up. So I crushed them, and I put them on his tongue. And I said, all you have to do is suck. And he sucked those pills down. But he never opened his eyes again. And his breathing got so slow. So I ran and got my mother-in-law and our 2 children, and we stood beside his bed, and we said, Daddy, we love you, and it is okay to go. And he stopped. We had a funeral service, and we had a memorial service. And 6 days later, I began to paint. I began to paint a gigantic mural in Washington, D.C. It's 17 feet by 70 feet. And it was amazing and it was powerful, but I got to tell you, in the first weeks of widowhood, it was a godsend. Because when someone dies in your life, a lot of people don't know what to say. And so what they do is say nothing at all. And so you're alone. You're doubly alone. But when I would paint on the street, first the homeless people came. And they talked to me, and I got to tell you how many of them are homeless because of health care. And then the regular people came and they talked to me. And then the reporters came and they talked to me. And then we were all over the news. I was tweeting, I was blogging, I was Facebooking, I was posting everything I could do to tell people, oh yes, access to care is incredibly important. Oh yes, the entire nation needs to be insured. But if you do not have access to the electronic medical record, you will never get the care that you need to have or be able to make the choices you need to have. See, this is 73 cents. There are 17 different people in this painting, and not one of them is making eye contact with another. And that was the status of care when my husband was hospitalized, and that is what we are working around the world to change. On October 20th of 2009, we dedicated this mural by singing songs from the Buffy the Vampire Slayer musical. It was amazing. NPR was there. They actually caught it. It was just a spectacular moment in time. But one of the last questions in that musical is, where do we go from here? And that is my question for all of you. See, what I did is I started painting really big data sets. This is George Washington University Hospital. We were never treated there. Their data sets online. So I painted about it and I gave them a report card. This is based on their HCAHPS scores, patient satisfaction scores. And based on those, they got C's, D's, and F's in 2010. Now, when I was painting this, I decided to paint it in front of the institution. So it was amazing. It was like the internet in real life, and everybody stopping by, pinging on me. And one of the people who came up to me with her eyes all open, she was like, where did you get this information? I'm on the board of the directors of this hospital. Where did you get this information? I said, it's freely available online. Anyone who goes to your institution can see it on hospital.gov. And oh, it was a spectacular moment because people hadn't realized this stuff actually is important and patients can make choices about their care based on this kind of institutional information. I also heard about this thing called Body Shock the Future. What quick, dirty things can we do? What fast campaigns can we do to change things rapidly in healthcare? And what I decided to paint about was the bedside tray table in hospitals. See, unfortunately, that is routinely used for incontinent bedding changes and food service within hours of each other, and no disinfection between the two uses. That's a rapid change. If we stop doing that, they could save a whole bunch of lives who are currently get hospital-acquired conditions. I worked for an entire year with a whole bunch of patients like e-patient Dave to make sure that meaningful use had a core measure, and that core measure would be patients have rapid access to the electronic medical record. I was very blessed on July 13th, 2010, to be on the stage at Health and Human Service with Kathleen Sebelius and Regina Benjamin and Don Berwick and David Blumenthal presenting stage 1 meaningful use. And they invited the patient. And it was a beautiful moment in time. The original piece of legislation only had a sentence about us being part of it, and this was changing. There are groups, institutions, organizations, and companies who don't like what I have to say. They get actually very angry with me. And I got to tell you, yes, they may resist us, but we will prevail. See, because of mobile technology, there's things like guerrilla tactics. We're going to get to the information. We'd like it to be sooner rather than later, and we would like to work with people. This is amazing. This is Green Bay Health in, Bellin Health in Green Bay, Wisconsin. I don't know if you've ever been out there. I was astounded when I was out there. They truly believe in the patient voice within the electronic health record. One of the things that happened there is they have this amazing stroke program, and their CEO, who once worked in housekeeping, okay, he went to his team, the stroke team, and said, how are we doing like 18 months to 2 years out? And the stroke team said, oh, we don't know. We don't track that far. He said, get on the phone, find out. So they got on the phone with Betty Bundy. Okay, so they said, hi, Betty. This is Bellin Health in Green Bay, Wisconsin. We want to know how you're doing. And she said, Bellin Health? Oh, you sucked. You almost killed me. You lost my medical record. And it was just amazing. She had so many problems within 3 days. Actually, her stroke was partially because they couldn't get to her information between all of her stays. So she came and she spoke in front of the entire institution, and Betty has filter failure. So it was the most amazing conversation. And they were so impressed by her and what she had to say, they decided to do something spectacular. They were going to have a new electronic medical record system implemented in their institution. Instead of calling it by the name of the manufacturer, whoops, I'm back. They called it Betty. And guess what that did? You know, when the nursing staff or the doctors or whoever's interacting with the electronic medical record gets so angry and says, blah, 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 company, I'm so frustrated. Are they going to say that about Betty? No, they love Betty. Betty's great. So it just changed the entire implementation, but they did not stop there. They had a room like this one, and they did EMR workflows on every single table, and on every single table there was a happy face balloon. You want to know who that happy face balloon was? Well, Betty was one of them. But every table had a patient, a guy who worked at Lowe's, or a person who was at the diner down the street, regular people at the table doing EMR workflows. That's patient integration. Okay, this is my son, Freddie, and he went to a doctor's appointment. Now, if you look at those toys, pardon me, it's Isaac, my little son. Those toys behind him are classic toys like that you had when you were a child. Okay? And they taught you how to be a patient. If you go into a preschool all over the country, you're going to probably see different PlayStations, right? So you're going to see a grocery store, right? You know, they'll have a little shopping cart and a cash register, and they play grocery store. If you see two children playing, and one child is seated with paper in front of him, and there's another child with a chalkboard and a drawing on it, they're playing, yeah. And then they're playing a good game of school, it looks like. Well, when children are seated and one of them is being treated and one of them is just seated, it's a game called doctor, right? And that means only one person owns that relationship. Well, when my son went to a clinic in Washington, D.C., okay, a clinic, walk in, they handed him a netbook and said, here, you can start building your electronic medical record. He was 5. And he typed what he could, and when he couldn't do any more, I started typing for him. We had this wonderful give and take of asking questions, and I'm typing it all in, and I push submit, and then we tried to give the netbook back to the staff, and they say, oh, you've already submitted it. We have it electronically here at the counter. You can just use the netbook for surfing the web. And then we were surfing the web, and then we got into the doctor's office. We still had a netbook, and the doctor started Googling my son's medical condition and teaching him about it through Google. And then my son just was like beaming with happiness, completely understood what was wrong with him. The doctor handed him a little piece of paper that explained, discharge summary, what kind of medicines he was going to be taking. And my son just literally strutted out of that clinic. And then 1 month later, we went to his regular checkup. And at his regular checkup, the doctor turned her back from him, typed into a computer screen, and asked me all the questions. And a few minutes in, he started to get the wiggles. And then finally, he jumped, walked right up to her and walked around, got his face in her face and said, "When is it my turn to type?" Okay? So that's the future that is coming. Open notes. This was really big. Back in 2010, I got on Twitter and I was tweeting about we really need open notes. And the Robert Wood Johnson Foundation started tweeting to little old me. I was like, "Hi." And then he said, "Just wait. We've got a study. In 2 years, you're going to see." And in 2 years, in 2012, they came out with the results, and they were amazing. 90% of patients who responded understood what they had read and were not bothered by it in their medical record. Only 1 to 2% were concerned. 87% of the patients enrolled in the study did check the notes because people told us, "Oh, those patients, they're not going to even bother. Don't need to give them information. They're not going to look at it." Doctors only had negligible workflow issues, and 80% of patients claimed greater adherence to medical protocols due to access of notes. This was astounding stuff. And of the 1 to 2% that were concerned about what they had read, the doctor shared one story. He had a patient who they had never discussed before about the fact that he was morbidly obese. So when the patient read online in his portal that he was morbidly obese, he called the office up. He was so angry. He said, "I want to talk to you. I read that I am morbidly obese in my medical record, and I want that out of there." And the doctor said, "We have a way of doing that." And 60 pounds later, it's not in there anymore. This is Dr. David Shear. He's a major proponent for people who have electronic devices in their body. They should be able to get that information. Right now, it goes to the vendor who made the device, it goes to the doctor who's treating the patient. The patient has no access. But they could do amazing things if that could be coordinated with their Fitbit, which could be coordinated with their EHR. The walking gallery, telling one patient's story a jacket at a time. This is a quote by Shepard Fairey that I just love. "The more stickers that are out there, the more important it seems. The more important it seems, the more people want to know what it is. The more they ask each other. It gains real power from perceived power." See, there used to be medical conferences where no one had a painted back. In the world of patients, we see backs all the time. We see open Johnnies, right, in the hallway. There's nothing that represents a patient more than the back of them. Well, why don't we take that back and change the world with it? I painted this jacket about a medical conference I put together with informatics professionals and doctors and psychiatrists and nurses and patients who all got together in one space and are working on changing the world. And this is a friend of mine from the Toy Store. She's a regular person. Her name is Morgan. And she didn't get to say goodbye to her mom because her mom's doctor didn't really make it clear how little time she had left. So Morgan's mom let Morgan go to the trip that she'd been planning for years to Scotland, and she was there enjoying the Highlands when her mom died. And she didn't get to say goodbye. So she's a regular person, but she'll tell anybody in the world, we have to change this. We have to have where people are willing to have conversations. My eldest son, Freddie, did not feel welcome in the hospital setting. In the mural, he is an eye in a door crack. That's how much he feels part of the situation that he was in. But when he joined the walking gallery, he told Mommy, "This is what I want you to paint me. I want you to paint me the parking lot kiosk where they take the money. And then I want you to put a skull on top of that. And then I want you to put coins in that skull and dropping down. Because you should not make a family pay to park when they're watching their daddy die." This is articles that have been written about the walking gallery. We've been on NPR, Marketplace, Fox News. People are paying attention to a social movement that involves paint and data access, and it's changing things. This was an article that was in ePatients Net, and it says, "Regina Holliday is not special." And I love this article because I'm not. I'm a regular old person. But what I did is I decided to use every talent and ability I have to change the world and make it a better place for patients. And I'm sure that's what you want to do too. See, the painting I have on my back is called Little Miss A-type personality. Right? because that's what the doctor called me when he saw me in his office. And the type of painting, this is called painting in negative space, because I took a negative and I turned it into a positive. I did not paint an A on my back, I painted the world around it. And I would like to close with a poem today. It's called The Writing on the Wall. When I was only 6 years old, I wrote upon a wall. So sad, so small, and all alone, I smote my cares on stone. The other children ran and played, like ants they'd come and go. But I stood silent, chalk in hand, and wrote upon a wall. The teachers, they would pass me by and talk amongst themselves. The children ran and laughed and played and left me to myself, and I would draw and sculpt and scratch. The art would soothe my soul, and I left the best part of me as powder on a wall. At 7 years, I'd learn that walls are hollow things, that fathers beat and children greet, whips with tears and screams, that gentle voices can't help but fall beneath the pain, that walls give way to fists and boots, and drywall cracks with age. I wrote my sorrow on a page and dropped it in the wall, hoping it would speak for me if I could speak no more. 7 years old I may be, and slow and sad and small, but even I could read the writing on the wall. At 30 years and 7, I found the wall again. I remembered in my sorrow that bricks can be your friends, that cinder blocks and stones can calm, that paint can make amends. So I took all my grief and I smeared it on a wall, and the children watched in wonder, and the world would hear my call. Sometimes within our anger, sometimes in grief and rage, you can write your testament in gigabytes and paint. When I was only 6 years old, I wrote upon a wall. So sad, so small, and all alone, I wrote my cares on stone. But I no longer write alone. The world has heard my song, and I thank God each night my friends log on. They read the writing on my wall. Thank you.